You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Listen to you. You're doing... Please.
Let's get started.
All right, ready? Here we go. Let me give a little clap so I can find it. Shh. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ask a Guide, a short episode of Addressing Gettysburg in which we ask questions that we've solicited from you, the listener, and ask a licensed battlefield guide for the answer. Today, on our inaugural episode of Ask a Guide, we actually have two guides. We have Bob Steenstra and Jessie Wheedleton. Hello, guys. Thank you and welcome. And there they are in silence.
Well, you're supposed to do ladies first.
I'm a bonus.
Jessie and then Bob.
Well, but everybody knows you.
You did
already.
For
you see, Jessie's the new one. You go and, like on the credits of a show, and introducing Shirley Temple or whatever.
So are you taking a circuitous
I'm taking a circuitous route, yeah.
I feel like I'm on a game show, but I don't win anything but anxiety.
The winning is when it's over and you realize it's not so bad. All right, so anyway, let's get down to this here. We've got some questions coming in from Facebook and from Instagram, and we're going to start first with Lanson Morris. Lanson, that's an interesting first name. He says, aside from the superiority of Union artillery, what are some factors that presented issues for the Confederate gunners? He says, I know that mixed batteries of different gun types was an issue as well as a logistical nightmare, but what are some other issues that presented themselves to the Confederate gunners throughout the battle? I think first maybe you should answer what he means when he talks about mixed batteries of different gun types, in case, the novice out there doesn't know what that's referring to.
Okay, well, typically in the Southern Army, they have 4-gun batteries, and there's always an exception to basically everything we're going to say, right?
Right.
But they would have 2 Napoleons and 2 rifled guns. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the Union Army, they have usually 6-gun batteries, and they're all the same type, which makes resupplying a lot easier. And it's not really that the Confederates don't want to operate that way. It's just it's very hard for them to turn it around at this point because it would mean getting more guns from somewhere else.
Okay.
And they don't really have
And there's
the
some
luxury of doing
advantages.
that.
I'm sorry. There's some advantages to mixed batteries because a smooth bore, being a 4-inch bore, a larger bore, has larger canister. So if it's anti-personnel, close range, you have some guns.
Like if they're being overrun.
It's a little more versatility.
Yeah.
You've got some with reach.
Okay. Any other problems, issues that presented themselves to the Confederates besides the ones we've already talked about?
Well, Henry Hunt is a big one.
Okay.
Oh, the Union artillery had something to do with this?
Well, right. I mean, they don't have Henry Hunt. And
right.
They don't have someone like Henry Hunt that's an overall command of the Confederate artillery as a whole.
So it's like a command issue too.
Right.
Right. And because is there a Henry Hunt in the Army of Northern Virginia?
But nobody remembers his name.
Is it Pendleton?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So, but he was like what? He didn't really do anything because everything was attached to the Corps as far as artillery goes. Is that right? The reserves?
Well, I mean, he's an overall command, but he's just not the personality that Henry Hunt is. He doesn't write. Henry Hunt writes a lot after the war, so it's kind of like Edward Porter Alexander really steals the show in my book for the Confederacy.
Yeah, me too. Right.
But
he seemed to be everywhere.
Well, and when you try to, if you ask somebody, well, what's Edward Porter Alexander's role in the Confederate Army? It's not anywhere. He's like 2 from the top. He's got Pendleton at the very top. He's Longstreet's Corps Reserve.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the next one here. 230_grain from Instagram wants to know, there's a marker on Culp's Hill, Ohio, 230, an Ohio regiment, I believe. It has a list of principal engagements. One says Ringgold, Maryland. I've never heard of anything happening here in Ringgold, Maryland, besides the Confederate retreat that cut through here during the rainy night. I wonder if you could shed light on what those principal engagements mean exactly, and if you have any more further knowledge of Ringgold, Maryland during the campaign. All right, Jessie, you
Can I just say something quick?
Yeah.
I'm looking at a picture from the website Stone Sentinel of the monument, and it just says Ringgold.
Yes, it doesn't say Maryland,
Well-
but that was
Doesn't say
part of the answer. Yeah.
This person says, I've never heard of anything happening here in Ringgold, Maryland. So I think they live in Ringgold and got real excited when they saw it on the monument.
I think that's the sense I got too.
Now, the monument spells it with 2 G's. Is that how he spells it?
Yeah, he spells it with 2 G's.
Okay.
So sadly, it it is a different Ringgold.
Yeah, it's Ringgold Gap.
Right.
What can you tell us about that?
But a lot of people don't know that elements of the 11th Corps and the 12th, then the entire 12th Corps was sent to Tennessee after the Battle of Gettysburg. So Ringgold Gap is the battle that happens after Missionary Ridge.
Okay.
As the
By the
Union
way,
Army
for-
is driving through the southern line.
For those of you who maybe can't picture where this is, if you're at the Culp's Hill Tower and you kind of head east with General George Sears Green, savior of Culp's Hill, besides Charlie Fennell, with his statue on your right, as you're going downhill a little bit, you'll come to the 66th Ohio, which is at points, it's kind of firing enfilade fire again from the side south into the attacking Confederates on July 3rd.
Is that Jones?
Yes.
Yeah, and there's
Jones's brigade that he's firing into, that they're firing into, I should say.
There's also a little marker that says where Major Palmer was mortally wounded there for the 66th Ohio commander.
Okay, but that is a pretty cool answer, though, that the 11th and 12th Corps were sent out west, and that's why that's on the monument.
George Green is there, John Geary is there, and both of their sons are in their units. Geary's son is in the artillery, Eddie Geary. He's with Knapp's Battery section that's right uphill from the 66th Ohio, and that's where John Geary's son dies in Chattanooga.
Very cool. Very not cool that he died, but very interesting little ties there to Gettysburg. Okay, so the next one here is Bill Etzkorn, I think I said that right, Etzkorn III on Facebook queries, the stand of the 151st Pennsylvania allowing the Iron Brigade to pull back on Seminary Ridge is a forgotten heroic event during Day 1. Was this to save face for the Iron Brigade, or is it just lumped in with the numerous heroic actions during the battle? Interesting. Was it why do we not know about these guys? The 151st. Tell us a little bit about them.
They're part of Biddle's Brigade of the Union Army, and they were the only regiment of that brigade who was held back to be a reserve there by the seminary, when the rest of the brigade is coming and they're marching north in that swale just west of Seminary Ridge, and when they get near the seminary they wheel to their left and now they're facing west, and they're going to take position. If you can't picture this, folks, and if you've been here before, on the auto tour of the national park, when you're starting out, you're heading to the first stop of it, you'll be on Route 116 is what it's called today, but it's the Fairfield Road. And when you leave the Fairfield Road to the right and head north, it's that series of monuments you find right away on your right. Okay. The ones on the left are some Confederate cavalry brigades, right? But the monuments you'll see, that's Biddle's Brigade, and you won't find the 151st Pennsylvania in that row because they were further to the east, to your right, by the seminary. During the afternoon's attack, Heath's division again, the same guys who came in the morning for Southerners, they are fighting against the Iron Brigade a little bit further north in the trees, and they're fighting against Biddle's Brigade, which is that row of monuments we just talked about. There's a gap between Biddle and the Iron Brigade regiments. And the Iron Brigade and Biddle's men are can I swear on a podcast?
Sure.
They're catching hell.
Oh my God! Hold on. Let me hit the 7-second delay.
And Doubleday will tell Rowley. Doubleday's the commander of the First Corps by this point, and Rowley's the division commander, having taken that position when Doubleday moved up. He tells Rowley to get the 151st in there to cover that gap between the Iron Brigade in the trees, basically, and Biddle's Brigade. And so they come up there, and the 24th Michigan and the 19th Indiana, who are really, it's bad. They according to some people, they think that this might be the relief because this is a 460-man regiment. This is a
Pretty big
regiment.
Yeah.
151st. That's a recent regiment because their numbers are sequential from the beginning. And so the Iron Brigade is going to fall back to their north or to their right, and they're in position. Biddle's Brigade's also going to move back. So the poor 151st is going to take the brunt of the attack for a while.
So they're kind of like left out there, kind of hung out to dry almost, right?
Yeah. In fact, they're going to lose, according to Fonts.
Oh, I was just looking that up.
Yeah, they're going to lose
Like 200
2/3 of their officers and 77% of their enlisted men.
And they have the highest casualties of any Pennsylvania regiment.
Yeah. I mean, just think about that. The 24th Michigan, correct me on this if I'm wrong, anybody, but I think the 24th Michigan only ended up losing only. You don't say only before you say 73%.
Some people dying.
Yeah.
or getting killed or hurt.
But this is like one of the most badly blooded regiments of all. And there were quite a few school teachers in this regiment.
Yeah.
And as a former school teacher, I think they should get some credit.
Sure.
But as far as the reason why it hasn't been talked about, it's just that it hasn't been talked about. I mean, as much. It's just there's nothing you can do about it but talk about it yourself and
Yeah, because there
Put it
are
out there.
plenty of stories of valor and heroic deeds through this battle.
Joshua fit the battle of Gettysburg, Gettysburg. Joshua fit the battle of Gettysburg, and the Rebs go tumbling down.
That's
my point.
That's the blackmail.
I think
clip.
he really wants that song.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
My point is that Joshua Chamberlain sucks up all the oxygen in the room.
Okay.
And
I
You
get
can't fault him for living longer than everyone else.
no, I can't. In
Right.
fact,
And being a good writer.
Chamberlain is one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
Because of his character traits.
Right.
And I don't mean to take anything away from him and what he did, but it certainly isn't the only story of valor on this battlefield.
No, there's plenty of them.
Right, and it took all of them to win the battle.
Right.
It's just people are too overwhelmed if you're going to go into every single one. You have to pick and choose. So certainly if you have people from that part of Pennsylvania, people that are school teachers, that's a great regiment to focus on, especially because when you get to the Pennsylvania State Monument, you go right up to as you're facing it, the left corner, and you see all the stars on the monument. And I think that really resonates with people.
very
So
compelling.
before I take kids up into the PA Monument, I usually show them that.
Oh, that's a good one, too.
I'm showing every 8th grade field trip I can.
All right.
Okay, so
And you
I'm
tell
trying
them-
to do my part, but
And again, you're telling them not to fall off the top.
but anybody, I mean, anybody can do a YouTube video or come up with a program on any unit that they feel strongly about. There's nothing stopping you from
there's a lot of them. 16th Maine. It's another one that just came into my head.
Yeah, and they were in the 70 percentile of losses too.
Yeah. First Minnesota,
it's so
everybody
hard
knows
because
that one.
the Iron Brigade, they've got the nickname, they've got cool uniforms. The Tennessee
Yeah.
soldiers talk about seeing them for, so there's
And the
so many.
151st, what was their nickname? Isn't it the teacher?
The school teacher.
The school teacher? Yeah, and everybody hears that and they're like, good.
hey.
No offense, but I'm saying, kids hear that and they're like, oh, I wish Mrs.
Did you hear what we're
I don't
saying?
know what
there?
kind of student you were.
All the regiments that we were just mentioning, as far as having terrible casualty counts, and I was about to say the 157th New York, which is also over 75 or over 70%. They're all first day. I mean, a lot of times people don't understand how awful in terms of percentage of casualties the first day was. We think of it as a meeting encounter. Both armies weren't up here,
Right.
And sometimes you don't even go out to the first day if you don't have time, if you're giving a tour.
Yeah.
But
Well, and for a lot of the Confederate regiments, they suffered heavy losses, but then they're asked to fight again on the third day.
Yeah.
And so you can't really tell quite how many casualties they take. on
Which
the first
day they
alone.
took them. Yeah. Right.
Which would be a good podcast sometimes. Which regiments were actually engaged all 3 days?
Oh, I like
there
that
are
one.
some.
Yes. That's all right. We'll do that.
Or for the longest, well, I don't know.
The long, what? Well, we'll.
Like the longest duration at one time. Like Anderson's.
Like who
brigade in
you
the
mean
wheat
who
field.
who fought the longest length of time? At nonstop, you're saying?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Well, we'll hash that out.
Cut that out.
Okay, and we'll cut that out as well. All right.
I'll just make a loud screeching noise anytime I want something cut out the way it spikes on your...
All right, here we go.
I can't do that.
GPaint1977 from Instagram is dying to know, besides Arthur Fremantle, were there other foreign military observers with either army during the Gettysburg Campaign? Jessie, we'll shoot this over to you. It's your turn. You've got $500 on the board. Go.
I'll take Arthur Fremantle for $200.
Well, that's a given. We know that one.
That's why it's cheap. There were 4.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's an answer to this.
Yeah, I made a card about this for the guide exam, and they did not ask about it, so don't worry about that
It's
at all.
finally come in handy. Go ahead.
All right. So there are 4 total. And Arthur Fremantle, you could call kind of an unofficial observer because he's just in the United States because he wants to come along. He's not really sent by anyone.
All right.
He met Raphael Semmes when Semmes was on the CSS Sumter in Gibraltar, and he just decides he's going to check out the Civil War in the United States. So this is 1863. He leaves in March and arrives in Texas in April, and he leaves by July 15th, right after the Gettysburg Campaign, right after the New York draft riots. The 3 others have an agenda. Captain Justus Scheibert is a Prussian army engineer sent by the government to inspect Confederate fortifications. So he's more of an engineering-minded dude. And then Captain Fitzgerald Ross is an Austrian cavalry officer. And Francis Lawley is working for the Times of London and wants a view of the wealthy classes in the United States, but he's not exactly a supporter of slavery.
Okay.
But
All right. Well, there you go. I hope you enjoy that answer. GPaint1977. Instagrammer JD asks, Hola. My question is about Picketts Charge. What % of Confederates do you guys think stopped at the Emmitsburg Road because it was suicidal or untenable or not going to happen? Thank you. This is a weird question. Not a weird question, but it's a tough question to answer. And go ahead. Give us why. Why is it a tough question to answer?
well, imagine I told you 526.
Okay.
Does it matter?
I'm imagining this. Yeah, go ahead.
We'll never know the number of people who stopped in the road,
Right.
And numbers are the hardest thing, aside from time, to pin down when we're talking about the battle. Would you agree, Bob?
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone outside of God would know the answer to that question.
Right.
Off the top of my head, desertions are a little higher at Gettysburg. And I'm imagining a lot of those are from Picketts Charge. It's still not.
You're saying desertions in the Confederate Army or
we're
both?
talking about hunkered down in the Emmitsburg Road.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. Oh, you mean hunkered down as opposed to turning around and getting out of here? I'm not going to do this anymore.
Or both, I guess is really what it's saying.
Yeah.
Like, how many people got that far and said, no, thank you, I'm not going any further? I guess the real answer that you're trying to say is that there is no way to really know that. They didn't account for people. It's, how far did you get? And,
We don't even know the total casualties of the Confederates in Picketts Charge because a lot of records were just lost after the war.
When people ask a number, they want to feel an emotion from it. You want to feel for those people who had to have felt that way. There has to be somebody, in 12,500 people that make this attack that is going.
Because that's what we're thinking we would
Hell
do.
no.
I'm thinking I wouldn't go this far. And was there anybody else, or am I a coward?
But honestly, I think the obstacle of the Emmitsburg Road, I think, has been exaggerated over time. When you go back because I went back and I read through some accounts because of this question. And, when you read through it, they're talking about the road as an obstacle, but pushing forward. They're pushing past it.
Right.
And it's, I feel like they're moving past it and going forward.
So
wherever possible.
Is this idea of it stopping them up and then now they're just like ducks in a barrel? Is that kind of a romanticized?
There's like a recoil when the Union infantry stands up for the first time at the wall. It's blast them.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever been. Have you ever been to a reenactment?
Yeah, I've been to one or two.
Well, how many?
I think 70. I don't know.
Really?
Like a couple of dozen. I don't know. Yeah. No, not that many. Maybe a dozen.
Like the battle anniversary.
Oh, yeah. The big one I was at was the 135th.
Okay.
And then after
what
that.
Was that like? How many people were there?
I think it was, they said 20,000. Like they actually had pretty close. It wasn't that the Confederate side for Picketts Charge was close to 15,000, but it was Union and Confederate sides during Picketts Charge were about 15,000. So you kind of had to use your imagination there, but yeah, it was a lot. And then there's like 100,000 spectators, from what I recall hearing.
Well, I grew up in this area, and I never went to a reenactment. And when I started to get interested in the battle, I thought, well, all right, And I thought because all of the little reenactment, like encampments on the battlefield were free, that the reenactment was free. And then I found out, no. especially not if you want to see anything and you want to get up in the grandstand. So
you chickened out of the fence and didn't go over.
It was just before the 150th anniversary. So I thought, well, if I'm going to go to anyone, I'm going to save my money, I'm going to go to that.
That's the one.
And I'm going to pick, of course,
one
day. It's going to be Picketts Charge. So we did, and of course there's always no shade and you're crammed into there's no room in the grandstands. I was crammed next to they had people holding up fingers to show how many seats were left next to them, and everyone was holding up one finger. It's Bill and I. And so we're just like, well, we're just going to squeeze into one of these spots. And your legs are against the people next to you, and you feel their sweat running down. And there were about 15,000 reenactors there. I'm not sure how many were in that scene.
Right.
But there was this massive black cloud coming in behind the Confederates. And we're just like, which one is going to hit us first? It was really exciting. And it was perfect. So, as soon as you get to this awkward moment where the dead guys can get up, it just let loose on us. And
the
that was
trump
really
of the Lord is resounding.
That was the first reenactment of that scale I'd ever seen, because my dad reenacted the French and Indian War, and there were always 15 guys, at
nobody's interested in that stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry, nobody's interested in that stuff.
But so what happened was, here it comes, and it's really exciting. You're taking tons of pictures because it's the 150th reenactment, and it's really exciting. But I think the cool thing because people are kind of disappointed when you tell them that they don't hold the reenactment on the battlefield.
Yeah.
But if they held the reenactment on the battlefield, when they get to the Emmitsburg Road, you wouldn't want to touch the fence.
Right.
This is, you're not going to tear it apart like they did in the battle, but they do at the reenactment.
Right.
So they can just go nuts and do whatever they want to. And when they got to that fence and tried to go past it, they had 130 cannons at the reenactment. And you think that's the great effect, the cannon fire tearing through the ranks and everything. But they take such heavy losses when they get to that road. It was really an emotional experience, honestly. And I really wasn't expecting it. But when the hundreds of Union soldiers stand up and they're firing their muskets all at one time, that noise is louder than the cannons had been, through the whole thing. They're not even firing a round out of them.
Right.
And it just looks like machine gun fire.
Yeah.
And everybody that tries to get past that road is just melting into the ground. You know? And it's really kind of...
Oh, yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, when they get to that road, it's moving. Even though it's fake. And even though the Union guys are pointing straight up in the air, basically, but
and you get some bickering after the war is over between Virginia and North Carolina, saying we got further, no you didn't, and everything. But I don't feel like I've ever come across an account of somebody looking over and seeing someone cowering in the ruts of the Emmitsburg Road. No,
yeah,
I feel like in that moment you're so hopped up on adrenaline, you can't think about anything else. You're just thinking about what am I going to do?
And you made it that far. You might as well just go. Right. See, I don't know. It's hard to imagine because none of us have ever been in that type of situation. So,
well, I brought a little story if you want me to.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, I'm just offering stuff. If you
no, go ahead. Go ahead. People love this. Go ahead. Okay. Give us a story about the Emmitsburg Road.
So, I think one of our favorite stories of the Tennessee regiments and Picketts Charge comes from June Kimball of the 14th Tennessee. And the story most people know about him is that when he leaves the field, he talks about walking backwards part of the way before he gets out. And when we did the 150th walk across Picketts Charge. There were probably about 40 people that walked backwards across the, because I think it was just that story that they had heard somewhere or knew about it. If they didn't know his name, I'm sure they knew that it happened. But he talks about the moment that Armistead's men cross the stone wall. It's like that wave surges forward, and at that point, the Tennessee soldiers had started to link up with the Virginians, because Pickett's Virginians are kind of separated from the rest of the guys on the right side, and the Tennessee soldiers are pretty much coming up the middle with the Alabamans. And so I picture June Kimball jumping across the stone wall, pretty much right at the angle in the stone wall, just kind of riding that wave in. But as soon as the Armistead's charge comes across the wall, the Union regiments push back. So the Pennsylvania regiment there at the corner pushes back, and June Kimball hops right back over the wall and runs back to the Emmitsburg Road. So that's kind of where the story picks up here.
Okay.
When I realized that the assault on Cemetery Ridge was a failure, I sprang out of the enemy's works and rushed across the slab fence and dropped to the ground behind a large rock for protection. There were a number of other rocks similar extending with the fence, and behind each rock there was one or two men all busy loading and firing at the enemy's reinforcements coming up over the crest of the ridge to our left. At my side, behind a rock, I noticed a comrade also loading and firing. He was a handsome man, fair-complected youth. In fact, he was a beardless boy, as I discovered. Okay. I used in this battle a Mississippi rifle with which I had killed squirrels, considering myself a fairly good marksman. He's talking about Union soldiers when he says he killed squirrels.
Oh, okay.
While shooting from this rock, I noticed a Federal soldier clothed in blue pants and a red shirt, standing some 50 or 60 yards to my left with his left foot upon a low place in the rock fence, shooting at the retreating Confederates. In my effort to pick him off with good rest across my rock, I deliberately fired 5 shots at this red shirt. If I touched him, he gave no evidence of my splendid marksmanship. In my disgust, I turned to my boy comrade, the beardless boy, and said to him, shoot that fellow in the red shirt to the left. In reply, he exclaimed in a loud tone, "Why, damn him, I have shot at him 4 times. I am going out of here." He sprang to his feet, turning his back to the enemy, and in that instant, I distinctly heard the bullet strike his head.
Ooh.
He fell upon his face, was dead without a struggle. He was a member of Armistead's Virginia Brigade. He wore a neat, rather new dark gray uniform, and although a mere youth myself, I felt I looked so much older than that bright-eyed, fair-faced, brave boy looked, that a real sorrow passed into my heart, as lying by him, I knew that his gallant spirit had winged its flight to its God. At this moment, I deliberated as to my own course. Shall I or shall I not surrender, rather than attempt to run the gauntlet of fire from innumerable guns? And my first conclusion was to surrender. I laid my gun to one side, bowed up body, unbuckled my cartridge belt, and was ready. But this conclusion in preparation for the safe side of the question was quickly recalled as prison bars loomed up before me. I bowed up again, rebuckled my belt, grasped my gun, and sprang to my feet and made the run for liberty and won out. The nearby zip of unfriendly bullets reminding me of the danger of back wounds and the more or less disgrace that clings to such wounds caused me to about face and, quote, gallantly back out, which run and back out was safely accomplished and without so much as a scratch of clothing or flesh. It is due, perhaps, to state that when I left my rock, the red shirt man still stood in his hole in the wall, seemingly a very live Yankee, and no doubt returned my compliment of shots, as I made for tall timber. I, at least, was very cognizant of many nearby led messengers as they zipped on either side and made crosses on the ground in front. And then in my rear, in the backward movement, thanks to their poor marksmanship. June Kimball of the 14th Tennessee.
Wow.
So, it's a long time after the war. And, I think June Kimball's account is one that we go to because he's one of the people that talks about feeling that feeling of,
It's
cowardice
right.
of defeat at that moment.
It's a very human.
He probably wasn't the only
would
one
say.
going backwards like that.
No.
I remember early in my career, a guy hired me. It was the 3rd of July to do a car tour. And he said, I think he was from Virginia. He said, my great-granddaddy, 128 years ago, walked backwards across this field, and I want you to show me where. I couldn't show them exactly where, but I'm sure there were a lot of people who claimed to do the same thing.
Yeah. All right, so moving on now. Dannymusclehed. Dannymusclehed on Instagram needs to know. We always hear about casualties at Gettysburg, but can someone break down by killed, wounded, missing, and even desertions? Are these numbers known? So this is kind of, we were hinting at this before about how difficult numbers are.
What are your numbers that you use for the wounded from the battle?
The total aggregate number I use, because it's on most of the park literature and things, is 51,000.
Well, casualties total. Yes.
Total, breaking down. And this is where you get a problem already. How many Confederates? There's not many sources who disagree with about 23,000 Union. And then, how does that break down?
And 6,000 Confederates are left behind. So we know like the treatment of the wounded that are left in Gettysburg. So that helps us get closer.
Okay.
But then you're taking the wounded out of here on that 17-mile long wagon train, burying people alongside the road.
Right, so it's a lot. Now, right, because those guys didn't die outright on the field, but they died on the way out, and they're buried alongside the road or whatever. So you're getting
we estimate
death all
killed
along.
on the field about 8,000, dying in the hospitals 4,000. Those are the numbers that I usually use.
I don't go quite that high.
Well, and it's, you have the Elliott map, which is the only thing that really shows us where all the dead are buried at one point, and he's got estimates of 500 Confederates buried along the Emmitsburg Road. I was also looking through the book that Jim Hessler and Wayne Motts just did on Picketts Charge,
right?
And they were pointing at the Elliott map, and they were answering the question of how many men made it past the road. Well, there are 500 people that are indicated as being buried on the east side of the road. So. Yeah.
I usually say about 7,000 killed in action, a little over 7,000, and over 3,000 mortally wounded that will be wounded but will never recover. So bringing it about 10,000 or so. I think the new visitor center has a sign that says over 11,000, or the number is 11,000 people died at Gettysburg. And I always wonder about that, because I think the old visitor center said it was 10,000. So I figure people must have died building a new visitor center.
Well, and I don't want people to get hung up on numbers on a tour. So I would never tell somebody, if I know about it, something that contradicted too far from what the visitor center is telling you. Like they've done their research. You read your own things and you form your own opinions. But when it comes down to it, that the difference of 1,000 people doesn't really matter on a tour.
No, right.
And you can't really know the number anyway, so it's just really not worth it to just stress out over that.
Right. Well, and that's the point, right? Like it's the story isn't necessarily numbers. I mean, the numbers are horrible, and it's hard to imagine all that stuff. But really,
there's research still to be done as far as where everybody ended up exactly. So looking through each single regiment and looking up the papers of every person in that regiment, you think because this is the most popular battle that in the Civil War that somebody would have done that, but it's not something that one person can do.
No,
so if you have an ancestor in a regiment, like I have a friend who's a guide, and he was researching the 69th Pennsylvania, and found out in researching them that some of those boys took the pay at the end of the month, at the end of June, and took a train back to Philadelphia. So they were among the people that were probably scraped off the Pennsylvania monument.
Okay.
Because they used the payroll records to come up with the names on the monument.
Okay, gotcha.
So the payroll record, it's the end of June, they get paid. So they figure, well, it's one day before, the battle starts, so perfect.
Right.
But some people were sick of the war and took that money and ran with it.
But we do love our numbers, though. People do love to hear numbers. Well, what's weird to me is every guide that I overhear, every ranger that I hear, they all have a different number for things, and they all break it down differently.
And I would say, don't worry about it. Like, don't discredit somebody because they've got some weird number that you never heard of.
Yeah. And the thing is, and it's not that these guides or rangers don't know what they're talking about. It's that they've all read different sources who have done their own studies and come up with their own numbers, and and maybe they read it and they go, well, yeah, that kind of sounds more realistic to me, or those numbers make more sense to me, and that's what they stick with. But it's funny because I remember years ago when I was down here, I went on a ranger walk and they said there was 7,500 outright dead on the field, and about that who died in the hospital in the coming weeks of the wounds that they received.
Right. So a lot of people either round up or round
000.
down.
Yeah.
So I'm rounding up to 8,000.
Right. But
People round down to
saying
7,000. I feel like that's the difference between Bob and I.
But he was saying that about that double that amount died of their wounds within the next month or two. So that was
and Chamberlain
12 years
dies
ago.
of his war wounds in 1914. So,
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is these numbers are hard, but still, 7,000, 8,000, 1,000 dead people all at one time laying around is a lot of people. There's a lot. It's hard to imagine.
As long as you don't leave the battlefield thinking that 51,000 people were dead all over the battlefield, that's my goal.
There you go. Right.
Okay.
Because a lot of people.
That is obscene.
The town has,
and they say it on the History Channel all the time.
the town has like over 22,000, I believe it is.
8,000, 7,000 is still a lot.
Yeah.
Sure.
A lot of people.
No, and I think people almost seem
Can't handle
disappointed when they find
Right.
out that it's not 51,000 dead. 51,000 dead. It's like, no. No, the guy told us. He said 51,000 casualties. And then he goes,
That's the hard thing about it too, because you can spend all your time trying to be very particular on a tour, and that doesn't mean the person you're talking to is going to interpret it that way. And a really good example of that is the horse's hoof story. So whether or not I want to talk about it, I end up addressing it on about 50% of battlefield tours. And it's just like by talking about it, I'm keeping it going.
Right.
Because when they leave the battlefield, they've been absorbing a fire hose of Gettysburg for, a solid 8 hours probably, taking a tour, going to the visitor center.
Not to interrupt you, but for the people that are new to all this and they don't know what you're talking about with the horse hooves, explain them what you're talking about and why you're telling this story.
The true story is that in the 1920s, at the time, with the equestrian statues on the battlefield, the guides operating on the battlefield noticed that if one horse's hoof was lifted off the statue, that general was killed at the battle or was wounded at the Battle of Gettysburg. If two hoofs were lifted, as in John Reynolds' statue on the first day's field, not rearing back in the air, but kind of one front leg, one back leg, that means that he was killed. And that if all four horses' hooves are on the ground, like Lee and Meade, then nothing happened to him at the battle. And the myth is that it was a rule. So the sculptors didn't intend to do that. It's hard to
So
tell.
it just happened by accident is what you're saying.
It happened by accident, but it was a way
pretty
to tie the
interesting
horses
accident.
together on the battlefield. It was a way to interact with the people on the tours.
Right.
And that's why people still,
They still tell that
they
story.
still tell it
So
today.
that's a myth, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, but the problem is you're saying the sculptors didn't intend to do it, but even though you explain that part of it, it doesn't matter to people. So when they leave Gettysburg, they go to, Washington, D.C. It's not true there either. It's not true here anymore because Gary Castile sculpted James Longstreet statue in 1998.
Right.
And he raised one hoof off the ground. He wanted to depict Longstreet in motion. And
Right. But it's a little different of an equestrian statue than the other ones. The other
so
ones
some
are,
people will say if it's on a pedestal, it still conforms
Right.
to the rule, and they present it that way.
It does. Doesn't it? Even though the rule, it's not real. They never said, hey
But
guys,
it's-
let's do this. It all coincidentally works out.
It's a coincidence.
Yeah. So that was good. So basically for numbers, it's hard to come by and hard to break it down, but there's general ballparks that people agree on. Okay. All right. So Instagram sensation Anna_Storm says, any information you can share on the 1st and 3rd West Virginia Cavalry? I had family in both those units, so I'm confused about their contributions to the, I'm sorry, not confused. I'm curious about their contributions to the battle/monuments. Thanks. So this was, the 3rd West Virginia was in, Buford's division, right? And the 1st was over down with Farnsworth there in the South Cavalry field area.
That's right. And one was very large and one was very small.
One was very large,
and
one was
both
very
of them,
small.
there are several companies missing from both of them. So it would be important to know. I would kind of ask for more information before I try to look up any first-hand accounts, but we could do that for you. It's just we'd be interested in what company your ancestor was fighting.
So, but what if she
could mean
doesn't?
that they weren't there.
What if she doesn't know the company name? So would you go by name? If she knew a name, would you be able to?
I don't know for certain, but if you know
could
your
try.
relative is in a particular regiment, you usually know what company they were in.
Okay.
At least I do with my great-grandfather.
Okay.
So I'm assuming.
Maybe,
So
yeah.
for
all right.
the first West Virginia companies A and I were not present at the
Okay.
battle. Nevertheless, according to Stone Sentinel's website, they brought 436 men to the field.
But they both have monuments on the battlefield.
They do.
The 3rd West Virginia, we pass on just about every tour, is as you're on the first day's battlefield heading up to the Eternal Light Peace Memorial. And if you turn left to get out there, you go around a bend, and on your right, it's before you start to see the large and overshadowing New York cavalry monument.
Yeah, the 6th New York is a huge one. It looks like a chess piece.
Yeah.
And before you see that, you see the West Virginia, 3rd West Virginia. And I'll often say, now, because you're at that
Which
point...
has to do with funding and nothing else.
Exactly.
Not-
It's a good
not
example of here's West
valor or
Virginia
sacrifice.
monument and here's a New York
A rich
monument.
state.
But they didn't
versus
take
a
very
normal
heavy
state.
casualties, nor did the New York regiment. I mean, that's not their job on the first day. Their
No,
job is to
no.
to
In
gather
fact-
intelligence, to screen, and to buy time for the infantry to
The,
get
the
here.
first West Virginia's monument is one of the few ones that is not where they fought. They were at like the extreme left flank of the Union Army.
Where
part of
is their
Farnsworth's
monument?
division. It's on the Tawnytown Road. So, and they put it there so that people would see it because being at the extreme left flank, no one would go there to visit it. So everyone knows where the Pennsylvania Monument is, and if you are following the auto tour route, and you've gone past the Pennsylvania Monument and you're heading over to stops 13 and 14 Culp's Hill, you turn past the Pennsylvania Monument, you come to a T intersection at the Tawnytown Road, and you turn left as you're heading back towards the visitor center. It's on the left right over
in
there.
the little fence area.
Yeah,
there. Oh, I know
right.
exactly what you're talking
Right.
about. Okay.
I found a factoid.
Okay, go.
Okay. The colonel of the 1st West Virginia Cavalry, which is the one we're talking about, down by Big Round Top. Their colonel is the one who's promoted to take over the brigade after Elon Farnsworth dies.
Is that Richmond?
Yeah.
Private Taylor Bishop asks, where were the Tennesseans on July 3rd? Where were the Tennesseans? Do we know how many Tennessee regiments we had here?
Only 3.
3.
Only 3. And were they all in the same brigade?
Yep.
Yes, they were.
Oh, they
Matthew.
were.
First,
Okay.
7th, and 14th.
Whose brigade was that on day 1?
Archer's Brigade.
And then whose brigade was that on day 3?
Burkett Fry.
Burkett
I feel like
Fry.
I'm studying for the test.
Yeah.
And where were they on July 3rd?
They were right in the middle.
Yeah, they're the Brigade of Direction.
Smack
Gotta
dab
make it
in
to
the
the
middle.
copse of trees.
So they're Fry's brigade.
Kimball does.
And they're basically, is it right if I say that they're going along that fence line that kind of just goes straight out there, that they mow the path through?
They're kind of, where the trees come out into because there's a creek what stream is that? I don't know.
No, it doesn't matter.
So basically to the right of their state monument is where the brigade is going.
Okay.
Or to the if people can picture the Virginia Memorial, of course, Robert E. Lee statue, it's a real
Right.
famous one. It would be to the north of that, or to Lee's left.
To the left
of that.
of Lee.
Yeah.
Where that
because-
fence line is, and that goes straight
Basically,
across,
yeah.
basically, and they mow a path along that. And
If you would take the path that's just to the left of Robert E. Lee, and you would walk that across, and you look to your left, they're
would
marching
see
right beside you.
Tennesseans.
On your left is your
right.
cross.
Okay, I'm just
Right.
trying to give people a frame of
The best
reference
of
when
my
they come
knowledge.
here and
So
they can go.
they're the linchpin, and I think Jessie mentioned this before when she was talking about June Kimball and the question about the Emmitsburg Road. But they're going to be the rightmost brigade, are they not, of Pettigrew's division, and there's maybe a little gap there, but then the next thing to their right will be Pickett's division.
So Robert E. Lee is looking through the open space between the two
them.
wings
Right.
of the
Right.
charge.
Right. And then he would be seeing Pickett's division closing in, coming in over
From an angle.
as
Right.
they get further towards the wall.
Correct.
I can't imagine watching that. from atop that monument, that must have been great for him.
Yeah, I guess.
He's like, I got the best view in the house.
Yep.
All right. So they were all there. They were smack dab in the middle of Picketts Charge on July 3rd. You had something there you wanted to share with us? It looked like you had something you want to share. I'm sorry. And finally, Official Pearl Shannon asks, where is the visitor house and where does the battlefield start? These are questions I hear all the time working at Gettysburg, but and I think she's joking.
The visitor center?
Yeah, exactly. I think she's joking though. But this kind of reminds me of something that I've always wondered. What is the one question that stands out in your head the most from a tour where it took everything in your being to keep a straight face?
I'll let you go first, Jess, unless you don't want to. Because there's a couple, and you might take one of them.
Yeah,
and that's
I mean,
fine.
there's a couple basic ones that you wouldn't think you'd hear on a regular basis, but you do, and that is were these rocks here at the time of the battle.
Yes.
And they're
Isn't
gigantic.
that amazing?
Really?
But
You're
You've
at
heard
Devil's
this?
there were
Den.
more.
Oh, yeah. You're at Devil's
And the way
Den,
I
or
politely
Little Round
answer
Top.
this is that, well, actually, there were far more rocks here at the time because they got rid of them to put
Make the
and
roads.
made them the road beds.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of the very rocky and areas that really should look more dramatic, like the gap between Big and Little Round Top was filled in for the Park Avenue, which is upsetting.
One of our guides, who will remain nameless right now, but any guides who might be listening might know who I'm talking about. He'll sometimes joke with me if I'm up there at Little Round Top at the same time. He'll say, Bob, it's your turn to let all the air out of the rocks tonight. I'll pump them up in the morning.
Inflatable rocks. All right. So what? Okay, what's another one? You got another one?
All right. So my story started with the Segway Company in Gettysburg. Mm-hmm. And before I became a licensed guide, I was the safety person. So I would ride in front of the tour, keeping them out of the way of the buses and the ditch and all of that, gophers and what have you. But I listened a lot. So often, as a young lady, on the battlefield, I would receive educational tours where the customers, older gentlemen, would educate me and teach me about the things that they knew about the battle, and I would just keep my mouth shut for the most part.
Right.
So some of the things they would teach me were actually pretty entertaining, and the weirdest thing someone ever told me were up on Little Round Top, and he said, the cavalry really have an advantage because of their bow and arrows. They can sneak up on the infantry.
Stop it.
I'm not kidding. This man
was a guy that was telling you
plus years old.
He was telling you everything about, like, because you didn't know because you're a girl, and then this is what he comes out with. This same guy you're talking about.
That the cavalry at Gettysburg, well, that I guess Civil War
Cavalry
in general
because of the
have
bows and arrows.
bow and arrows.
Wow.
And I just don't know how do you get through that?
Bows and
Are you sure he wasn't pulling your cord?
No. I think
that's
he
amazing.
fell asleep right as two Western movies were playing back to back, and it just melded together. And I mean, even Native Americans are using rifles at this point.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So, I don't.
That's
yep.
interesting.
How about you, Bob?
So it wasn't a question; it was a comment. Okay. And in retrospect, I wonder if this person wasn't pulling my cord, because the comment, like you said, it was very difficult to maintain my demeanor and not diminish someone or anything. But the comment was, you're talking about the monuments. The veterans came here. They put the monuments up where they fought at some point during the battle. And the comment was, wasn't it nice that someone came out here before the battle and put monuments up so that the veterans or their soldiers would know where to stand? What do you do with that?
What did you do with that? How would you handle that? Or how did you handle
I just
that?
said, no, the monuments came after the battle.
And then you turned around and just bit your lip.
Right. But they had just a perfectly, if they were acting, they're the best actors I've ever met. Or that was one person. It was the best actor I ever met. There's also
some questions are just because people start to get comfortable with you, and then just everything they think starts coming out, and you're just like, well, I don't think you meant it that way.
Right. That's right. And I wouldn't want to be judged for every word that passes out of my mouth during a tour either.
Exactly.
Yes.
May that be remembered.
I had a person once, the 7th New Jersey monument, the three of us all of a sudden have we have an image of that. But for those of you who don't know what it's the shape of a bullet. Okay, you have a Civil War bullet, and it's a big bullet. You couldn't put your arms around it. The monument's so big. Anyway, this person said, I had just pointed to the bullet, or to the 7th New Jersey Monument, and I said, that's what the mini balls look like. And the question was, how did they carry those things? Because they thought
it was the size of the monument.
People think they left the cannons behind.
That's amazing how many people think that.
They just left the cannons
they are
here.
Their children. The artillerists would never leave them behind.
Right, and there's just so many of them that they just go and pick up another one. They leave after every battle. They just leave them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and we forget that there are so many people that are outside of this world that we live in, because there's so many people that are on the battlefield all the time in varying degrees of interest, but some level of interest that come here repeatedly, and then people that why would they have anything to do with the Civil War in their day-to-day lives?
You've got everywhere from very sophisticated people like your Instagram people who ask questions about the limbering up of guns on a particular day at a particular place. That obviously assumes a lot of knowledge, versus where is the visitor farm?
Right. Or where's the battlefield start? That's my favorite one. That it's just like...
So you have the battlefield guides giving tours of the field itself, but the government doesn't have any control of what happens in the town.
Right.
But they can limit the ghost tours, from operating on the park.
But not from the park.
So they can't go on the battlefield.
Right.
And so they advertise that, we are going to see the battlefield, but it's like the town is the battlefield.
Yeah.
And people are like let down by that, but it's like, no, people died. There are blood stains on the floors in these houses because people died up there.
Right.
It is the battlefield.
Yeah, the town is and it is more fascinating the more you learn about the town and stuff. And that we have that over on, we will when we launch it, the Patreon, with Ken Rich talking about the town. Tim Smith is supposed to come on and talk about it as well. So we'll have some stories about the town. But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. And by the way, both Bob and Jessie give tours for Getty's Bike Tour. So if you ever want to come out and take a bike tour in the spring with either one of them, let us know. Or if you would just like to take them around in the car, Matt at addressinggettysburg.com. I'll put you in touch with them. And that is it. Thank you all for listening to this inaugural episode of Ask a Guide. And we'll do more periodically from time to time, etc. So thank you.